Welcome to Ordinary People Doing Extraordinary Things, the podcast show. I am your host, Carrie Roberts, and today's episode is part of our relationship series where I interview various couples and talk about their stories, kind of like a When Harry Met Sally. So today I have a lovely couple, Justin and Devinne. So excited to have you both here, so welcome.
Thanks for having us. We're excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yes, so I want to start off, it's one of my favorite pieces to start with, is to really kind of go back, when you were in high school or maybe early college, what were your thoughts on relationships as a whole? I think a lot of either how we grow up or experiences we've had kind of shape what we think a relationship should be before we actually get into them. So Devinne, I'm curious, when you were a young girl, what was kind of in your head what you thought it meant to be in a relationship?
Yeah, so it's interesting because honestly, I don't have the best. I wasn't raised with the best relationship from my parents, and individually they both loved me, but for their relationship together, I feel like it wasn't the most loving relationship for each other, and so it was hard for me because I saw all of these different lacks of communication, and so I kind of thought that was normal, and so that's kind of stemmed and traveled throughout my life now, which is something that I'm still continuously working on. But I guess going into my high school relationships, I kind of dived all in, thinking that this was the love of my life. This is the most amazing thing in the world. Nothing's going to change. Everything's, great. And then reality hits and you're like, oh, isn't this isn't how it works. It's not just all the fairy tales of the Disney stories and everything like that. So I think just growing up, it was honestly a lot of that. I got cheated on really early, and so I think that then kind of went into my trust issues and trying to figure out how to make it work moving forward. And I think it just went, from there, kind of one relationship failed to the next, and how to make it work moving forward. Yeah, I guess that's kind of what I grew up with.
Yeah, I want to say, I think, that's actually a pretty common scenario. And we learn a lot from our parents, the good and the not so good. And that does definitely shape part of who we are, part of our thinking, and then, of course, our own experiences. Justin, I'm curious, you as a guy, did you have in your mindset what you thought a relationship should be, or kind of what was your influence or impact on that early on?
Yeah, I guess I mean I don't know. I always had girlfriends growing up. My parents are married, still married. I they were I had a good upbringing from my parents for the most part. Um, but uh, but that didn't mean that I looked at relationships the right way either. Um, I think I just I don't think that there was enough people talking about what a healthy relationship was until recently, and so I think a lot of us, probably yourself included, are just figuring out what healthy relationships are and being willing to talk about it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Asking this question to other people, sometimes, women, think it's like a fairy tale. They watch Disney movies, or they have this kind of, elite idea in their head. But like you said, everybody has different backgrounds, different things to work through. And so much of it is finding what's healthy for the two of you, for yourself, communication, and all of that. So I'm curious, with the two of you, I'm going to put the screen just on the two of you for a moment. I'd love to hear the initial story of how the two of you met, that kind of first encounter, whether that was in person or online or through a friend. I'd love for you to share that story. And Devinne, I'll have you start it if you'd like, and then Justin can kind of chime in as well.
Yeah, of course. So Justin and I were both working in Manhattan at the time. We were both in hospitality. I had met him through an event that I was planning, and kind of had eyes on him for a little bit. I was dating someone, he was dating someone, and he would always be the person that ran my events on site, and so kind of I was always innocently flirting, but so I always wanted him to kind of be the person that helped me make sure the buffets were set or anything going up to the event. And then it kind of came down to it. It was a funny story is actually two of the event planners I was with, they actually got too drunk that night and came down really late the next day. And they're like, oh my God, how can I make it up to you? Like, we had been up since like 5 o'clock. And I was like, find out if this guy is single. And they were like, what do you mean? And I'm like, they're like, do you want me to do transportation? Do you want me to do any of like the stuff that like an event planner hates to do? And I was like, no, just find out if this guy is single. And so she's like, you're kidding. And so it was like right around Valentine's Day, and she went up and she asked like some weird backwards question. I don't know if you even remember it. And she came back and was like, I think he's with somebody, but I don't think it's gonna last. I think it's like on its outs. And I'm like, all right, so there's hope. And so I kind of just, you know, we would kind of talk, and then it kind of got to the point that he ended something with his previous girlfriend. I was on a trip with my mom, and we only had Wi-Fi at the pool area, and so I had my iPad, and I kept going to the pool. And my mom's like, "Why do you want to keep going to the pool? Like, you love the ocean." And I'm like, "Well, like I wouldn't tell her like anything," and so I just kept texting this guy from my iPad because it was the only place I had Wi-Fi. And then we went on our first date actually the night that I landed. I remember texting him like in customs, like I just landed. And so he ended up coming up, picking me up later, which was funny too, is that we lived on the exact same street in Hoboken. So it's ironic, meant to be.
Justin, what's your side of the story? Were you noticing her early on the way she was noticing you?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think all the male managers noticed Devin, if I'm being completely honest. But yeah, I did. She was, like she said, she was the one that kind of initiated it all. Because I was dating someone, she was living out of town, she was teaching out of country actually. So it was a long distance thing. I knew it wasn't kind of working. I knew that when she got back, it was probably going to be over. But at the same time, I had to wait till she got back. So, there was, yeah, there was flirting, and it's funny. We would only contact each other on our like work phones initially. We wouldn't have our personal. We didn't allow each other to have each other's personal phones until we were both single. So it limited our contact, and yeah, so it was good. I'm glad that she did what she did, and yeah, it was good because we're both event people, that lifestyle is not for everybody, and not everybody will get it. So it made it easy on the relationship, knowing the kind of career path that we were on at that moment.
It's interesting because as I interview people, to hear whether they met in person or online, especially in the last, 10 years or so. So it's kind of neat that you both did meet actually in person, which I think is different for a lot of people these days. So where did you go on your first date?
We just walked around Hoboken, and which was funny. Well, because actually, so I lived with two girls at the time, and he kept offering to come over and cook dinner, and he's like, I'll be your sous chef. What are you making tonight? And I was like hesitant to bring him into like, my apartment with these other two people. And so I literally agreed to Starbucks because I thought like I don't know. I just was like nervous and apprehensive, and I've had so many other failed relationships, and I was just really nervous. And so he's like, I'll be your sous chef. And I just thought he was like really cute, like not like, I don't know, just like wanted to spend time with me, and just kept trying to make like, every scenario into like, let me see you. And so that was like our first date, and we just walked around Hoboken for a while. And what was funny with that too is when he came to pick me up at my door, we were wearing the same thing. We both had on like this green color, which is like ironic, the color of it. We had like this green color on, and he showed up, and we were like, "What?" But that was the first, I guess, like encounter. I mean, our first like real date. Was it the Spring Spectacular or was it 10th and Willow?
I don't know.
I remember, and I'm gonna tell you this story. I don't remember if it was like our first like real like when he was like really wowing me like, but he planned to take me to the Spring Spectacular, like the Rockettes, and again we wore we wore the same thing that day. We had on like leather, and then our shoes for some reason were the exact same. Um, and then we were sitting at the Spring Spectacular, and there was like a 3D session, and so we all had your glasses on, and then my my grandma always was a big like musical person, and they started singing in the rain, and all of these like musicals that I like grew up with. And my grandma lost her when she was really young, and me and my mom have matching tattoos of her handwriting on our wrists, like really close to me. Love her like deeply. And so sitting in the Spectacular, I started crying, and this is like the first time that like we were really hanging out. This is like our first like elaborate date, and I'm crying, and he's like looking at me like, oh my God, like what is wrong? And I can't explain to you like how like amazing this is. Like I just felt like my grandma was with me at that time, and she was like, this is the guy that you're supposed to be with. This is this is your plan. This is where you're supposed to be. And I just was like crying, and I'm like, I'm just so happy. And I'll never forget my cousin has like this text. I don't know if she still has it, but I texted my cousin that night and said, I found the guy that I'll marry one day.
I love that.
That was it.
Do you think, Justin, because I think I'm a crier as well. I cry happy, sad, whatever. That's how I release emotions. And I know some people have trouble handling that. Justin, when you saw her kind of crying for the first time, what was your reaction to that?
I don't know. I mean, it was fine. I'm okay with showing emotion and stuff, and I'd probably had a few drinks at that time, so it wasn't weird, or I didn't find it awkward or anything. I obviously knew it meant something. Meant something to her. So yeah, good.
And now, so Devin, it's interesting. Devin had this kind of early on feeling like this is the person I think I want to be with. At what point, Justin, do you think you were like, okay, I really like this girl. I think this is something different. This might be the person that I want to have a life with. Do you know at that point what it was for you?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if it was anything like there wasn't a moment in time where I can pinpoint it, but there just became, I was, when did we meet? I was 30-ish.
Yeah.
And I think I was just maturing to a point where I was like, okay, do I see myself with this person long term? And if I don't, then I'm just wasting time. And so I think I just kept that in the front of my mind. And as the relationship progressed and time went on, I just, I would keep asking myself that, and I would keep staying. And I wasn't super healthy mentally when we first met. I wasn't super, I didn't know. I was still figuring out a lot of shit. And sorry, excuse my language. I don't know if we can swear on here.
Yeah, you're good.
There was still a lot of stuff. So I didn't quite know. I was afraid of total commitment. I still think that that's part of what I'm trying to figure out now. I'm committed to her, obviously, but there's, I didn't know at the time. I just knew that being with her was better than being single, and that was good enough at the time, you know. And I just kind of kept it simple.
Yeah, I think it's, people definitely think differently. And I'd love if you feel comfortable to touch a little bit on, Justin, when you say, okay, mentally I wasn't in this great place, and how, what that meant, and how you kind of worked through that in your relationship, how it's kind of shifted over the years.
Yeah, I was just I was an alcoholic. Let's just say it. I had a drinking problem, and I had a really demanding career, and it was in hospitality in New York City, and just a lot of expectations. And I'm not from the area. I'm from Seattle originally, so I had some identity issues with just being out here, for finding a network that I could connect with. I had a lot of struggles, and I had a lot of things in my past that I wasn't dealing with too. So drinking was my outlet for a long time, and it hasn't been, thankfully, for the last 3.5 years. But
Congratulations.
thank you. And Devin and I have been engaged for 5 years now. So we got engaged while we hadn't even been dating a year, and we got engaged. I think it was 9 or 10 months, and yeah, I just of course things changed, and our relationship has changed a lot, and we've gone through a lot and continue to go through a lot. But yeah, but we're still here, so we keep working on it, and it's not perfect, but it's better than it was.
Well, and that's the thing I think too. You had mentioned earlier, Justin, as well, and even talking about your past, Devin. What is a healthy relationship, and trying to understand that. What's a healthy relationship with myself, with another person? What does that look like? And so when you have somebody who's going through something like that, and then they're trying to change, that is hard on the relationship. Devin, I'd love for you to talk about, how you kind of have mentally and emotionally dealt with that transition, because being able to go through something hard together and say, okay, we're a team, like we're going to do this together, is a huge deal. I think that's a huge part of a good relationship. So Devin, I'm just curious, how you've been able to handle that transition mentally and emotionally, because I think there are people that have, either themselves or their spouse that is going through something. And I think hearing someone else's story and what they've done is helpful for them as well.
Yeah, of course. It wasn't easy. It's still not easy. Like Justin said, like, yes, we are like committed to each other and we're in a relationship, and, I obviously I love him. But like there's some days it's really hard. And so, yeah, I mean, I had known that he had a drinking problem. And I had like kind of red flags that I guess I just didn't acknowledge really until I knew that there was something wrong. And then looking back, I was like, oh, this makes sense. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, I guess he had written me an email. He had wrote me an email and had told me like this is like what's going on, and that was like his way of communicating what he was scared to share out loud. And so I knew it, but like we kind of like then it was like, okay, no hard alcohol. Then it was there was different rules kind of around it. And so, I was trying to support him as best I could, not knowing obviously that it was like a whole different world, like in his head and what he was going through and the struggles and pain that he was dealing with every day. And so, I'll never forget the day that it, like he basically, like he called me really, it was a Sunday and I was really having a great day. I was like cleaning. I was like in my own, like, okay, Devin, like just stay, like, enjoy the day, enjoy the peace. Obviously, I had anxiety knowing all of this was going on, but just trying to stay quiet about it. I didn't really talk to anybody about it because it wasn't anybody's business. Um, and so I like made dinner, I cleaned the house, I was hanging with our dog and like doing all these things. And so like Justin was supposed to be home and I'm like, okay. And then I would check in again, and then hours would go by. And then, I reached out. Um, and then I was like starting to get worried because I'm like, where is he? What's going on? And so he ended up calling me and just saying like, Dev, like I messed up. And so I immediately knew, like, obviously, like, what had happened, where he, like, and so he was in a really bad, place. And I literally just took the dog and threw him in the car and we drove into Manhattan. And for some reason, he kind of told me where he was at one point, but like, I don't know. He always like street meat. So I went to these carts that I knew that he'd like, and I found him on the sidewalk, like laying down. And so I'm like, get in the car. My dog at this point, like, was a puppy, got car sick, threw up everywhere. And I'm like, let's just go home. And so that night, or the next morning, I don't remember, he had decided that he wanted to go to treatment, and so I'm dealing with all of these emotions. And so I literally left and I went to work the next day and I stole all of his credit cards. I took any cash that I knew was there. And I'm like, kind of like, you know, you deal with like what's going on. And so I went to work, and obviously that didn't go well. He obviously had found cash or cards or something and was drinking. And then I was on the phone with the American Addiction Center, just trying to find help, find anything. And so then we found a place, and within 48 hours, he was on a plane. And he actually went to Vegas for 45 days. But that, then when we figured that out, then it was like calling my parents to tell them like what was going on. I had to convince my dad, like, no, he didn't hurt me. I'm okay. Like, everything's okay. Like, and then my mom is like, well, what can I do? The like motherly part comes out. And so I'm like, nothing, I'm okay. And then I was grateful for her because she ended up coming. So I went with Justin to the airport and was able to walk with him to the gate and like watch him like fly away. And I was really grateful for the American Addiction Center actually that made that happen. And so then my mom actually just circled the airport and was like, call me when you're done and I'll pick you up and I'll bring you home. And she literally just had a bag packed and she just stayed with me and like took care of me, took care of my dog. Like, I was like shell shocked. Like, I didn't know what to do. And then it was like, then it's like, okay, what, fast forward, then it's like, okay, what did I not know about our relationship? What is a lie? What was true? What, you know, was I cheated on? Was he loyal? Was like anything in our relationship I was questioning. So I just didn't know what was happening. And so I kind of felt like I had it together for a while. And I was like, you know, at that point actually is when I found like my spirituality. I found like my God. I felt like that's when I turned my life over to God. And I was like, please, somebody help me because I can't do this like on my own. And so Dustin had a friend, or has a friend that's a pastor. And so I would literally talk to him all the time. His friends were really, really great. I reached out to them all the time and they were amazing. My friends actually all vanished. All my friends from home, I haven't talked to them since actually. They didn't support me staying with him. And I was like, all right, okay, bye. Like, I don't know, and so I haven't talked to them since. My friends from college were, incredible. Um, and so then it was just like one day at a time trying to figure out like what's next. And so I always said, and I'll continue to say it. I always said like, we're engaged, and regardless of what that means to anybody, like to me, like I made that promise, like for better, for worse, for, for richer, for poor, like for in sickness and in health. And so I was like, okay, like it's not like he chose this. Like he did not choose to be an alcoholic. He did not choose like all like these things that happened to him when he was a child. And so, I always like reminded myself that, and I was like, like, and I said to him, like, when he first got back, I'm like, as long as you're constantly working on yourself, like, I'm here, like, nothing, like, we're good that way. But it's been hard. Like, there's still certain times like that. It's tough. But I support him. I give him so much credit because like I don't know what it's like to be in his shoes. And I always tell him like I feel for you for the hurt that you feel, and I I wish that I could take that hurt away. And I'm sorry that you have to feel that and you've been through all of these struggles. And so I don't wish it upon anyone, but unfortunately, for a lot of people, it's very active and nobody really talks about it. And so there's that shame and that guilt and that all those like stereotypes about it. And so, Justin does a really great job of really trying to break down those barriers and talk real and talk about what's going on. And, it's real life, real life is real life.
Well, I first want to thank both of you for coming on and being here so vulnerable. I mean, that's huge because you don't have to do that. And I know that's hard sometimes to share that stuff, but it is nice when, like I said, to have the idea that somebody could be listening to this now or later and say, oh, like, oh, me too. You know what I mean? And there's that connection I think is really helpful. Justin, as you're hearing her talk about this, how does that make you feel in general?
It's hard. It's always hard to hear about those days, but it's a necessary part of the process. You know, it keeps me sober today. Just hearing people's story, even hers. I just happen to be the degenerate in her story, but um, yeah, I mean, like she said, it's the reality, and how we've been able to move forward is just being able to accept the reality, which I don't think a lot of people do.
Yes. Can you talk more about that? Because I think there's the acceptance is a huge piece of it. I'd love for you to tap into that more.
Yeah, acceptance is step one of any 12-step program that you're going to hear of, whether you're AA, NA, CA, SA, whatever A group you're part of, whatever 12-step process you're part of. It's step one is accepting where you're at. If you can't accept where you're at, you can't move forward. You know, or you can't grow at least. You might be moving forward, but you're not going to grow if you don't know where you're at. If you can't tell yourself truly where you're at.
Again, I want to congratulate both of you. Again, you said about a little over 3 years. That's huge. Justin, I mean, every day that you're doing this, it's healthy for you. It's healthy for her and those around you. Do you have any suggestions or maybe any personal stories you can share, Justin, of you kind of making that decision of, okay, I want to get help. I'm going to do this for myself, for us. If somebody's kind of in that place now and they don't know how to take the next step.
Yeah, I would just tell them that you're not alone. The hardest thing for me was that I just felt like I was just so alone and that nobody would understand me and that I would lose a whole lot of things and the uncertainty of it all. And so, you don't know where to turn, and which is the reason why a lot of people have to hit rock bottom, because they don't know. But what I'm finding now that I have a podcast that's kind of surrounding recovery is that people are choosing to stop drinking or stop using before they have an issue. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, I think, and we'll kind of get into your podcast in a little bit, because I think, like you said, talking to other people is a huge part of kind of building that community. And I'm curious for the two of you now, from kind of that moment you described, Devinne, to now, this 3 years later, how has this improved your relationship and changed it for the better, would you say?
I mean, I feel like our relationship is much more real. We've been very open about our relationship, and there is like my mom and a few of my really close friends that I kind of told everything to and opened up with, because I needed support at the time. I needed, and then it was also the hard part. Like, he came back from treatment, and it was like, well, he still like me. Well, I still like him. Then it's like you're kind of dating again and you're trying to figure things out. But at the same time, like, I needed to give him space to focus on himself. And then I was like kind of deteriorating at the same time. And then I went through my own like anxiety, depression for a really long time. But it was hard. And I did rely on like my mom and my friends a lot, because like he had to focus on himself. And I knew that. So I guess I know I'm not like really answering your question, but I guess um honestly, I think the biggest thing that we've learned, and I don't know if you would agree with this, but I think the biggest thing is that you really have to focus on yourself. And then if you're healthy yourself, then your relationship will be healthy. And, Justin from like these past like 3.5 years has really focused a lot on his mindset and his resilience and just like continuously pushing forward. And I think like at some points, like I fall short of that or vice versa. And we kind of have each other to pick each other up. And I mean, honestly, I told this story to two people today and I'll share it here too. But like I came home like actually the day of inauguration and I was like such a mess. And I came home and I literally like we I were like feet apart and I just like went into the bed and I pulled the covers over my head and I'm like crying and like just too many things happened to me that day that like my mind was just like not straight. And I'm like texting Justin, who's literally sitting like feet away from me. I'm texting him because like I couldn't like speak it to him and I was just like so upset with like what had happened like in our real estate business in that day. And so like I guess the point of my story is that there's just like we're just real people figuring out life. Life's not, it's not easy. It's not a fairy tale, but like I'm really grateful to have him next to me, besides me, with me. And, it's been a journey. And that's the biggest thing is really, he constantly reminds me, like, work on your mind, like work out, like do things that stimulate your mind because it that matters. And when I'm healthy, and it's like put your air mask on before you assist somebody else. Like you have to be healthy and love yourself before you can love anybody else.
Yes, I 100% agree on that. And I think, what I hear you both kind of saying is when you say we're more real, you feel maybe more connected. You're understanding each other a little bit more. I think it's interesting you're kind of sharing like sometimes we can't verbalize with our words speaking what we feel, but sometimes us texting it to each other helps us because we're better at doing it in the written word. And that's great too. I think sometimes people think like, oh, I have to talk to this person, but some people express themselves better through texting or writing. And so that's great. You guys are starting to connect again, better to yourselves. You're connecting better to each other, that's amazing. I mean, that's a huge part of it. I want to transition a little bit into the fact that you do own a business together. And I'm curious, why did you two kind of decide to start into this business? Because you were in a different space before. And what is that like working together?
Yeah, we knew we wanted to transition out of hospitality. Me personally, just because I had a bad drinking habit, and being in that environment with that much accessibility to alcohol was just not good for me. And I also started to, when I came home from treatment, my mind was just clear. I started seeing things different. I started evaluating my life a little bit different. And I knew even with the six-figure job that I had, I wasn't going to live the life that I wanted to live. And I wasn't going to have the freedom that I wanted to have. I wasn't going to be financially free. And even if I did eventually get financially free climbing the corporate ladder, I wasn't going to be like obligation free from that company. And so, I just started looking at things different, and so real estate was something that was kind of always in the back of my mind, and I started talking to Devin about real estate and trying to buy some rentals or trying to buy like a duplex and live in half and rent the other half, and it wasn't really working out the way we wanted to. We didn't know who to trust. It was just it's hard. Real estate's a juggernaut of an industry, and it's you don't really know who to trust. There's not a lot of education around it. The education that's out there can be kind of shoddy. So we basically we weren't doing it on our own, and so we ended up joining an educational program. We invested into an educational program, an investment into ourselves. Is kind of what we looked at it, how we looked at it, and And that really propelled us. I mean, that basically put our money where our mouth was. And, from that moment, we had a business. And, the educational group helped you start your business and helped you get going and then taught you about real estate. And so, we invested a lot of money and we had to figure it out. And so we did. But what I realized when we made that jump as an entrepreneur, all you're doing is making that jump a bunch of times. Like you're just constantly going through a barrier of some sort and finding the courage to go through a barrier or to fight, fearful thoughts. And so, like I said, we spent a lot of money on an educational program, but we knew we were going to get coaches. We knew that it had a good reputation. We knew that what they were offering was going to allow us to shorten the learning curve, was going to put some people that we could trust. It was a nationwide group of investors. So no matter what our real estate issue that we had, we could always find a coach for it. There's 50,000 plus members of this network, and so we thought this was probably way better odds than doing it on our own. And if we're going to spend a lot of money, let's spend some money. Let's spend a lot of money on an education that's going to pay dividends, fairly quickly. And instead of trying to do real estate on our own and making the mistakes and spending maybe double, triple, quadruple that, just trying to do it on our own. So, but again, that way of thinking is not normal, I don't think, to most people. I think most people would say, if we said how much money we spent on this program and starting our business, people might, laugh at us, or they just wouldn't understand because they don't think the way we do. And that's fine. They don't have to think the way we do. We have big goals in our life, and you know, we're the type of people that say we want to change the world because we believe the people that say that do it. And not everybody's willing to say that. So, and we're just starting that journey right now. But, going back to starting the business, having the business, and making the jump into entrepreneurship, quitting a job that was six figures, to start all over in an industry we didn't know is not something, again, people are willing to do, normal people. So, it's all how you look at things. And, you know, I had to have a few hard things happen to me in my life to put things in perspective. Going to treatment is one, my sister dying is another, dealing with my mom, my family who deal with, my mom deals with some opiate things. And so, for me, I just had to have some hard things kind of put life back into perspective and shake me up enough to see things differently. And yeah, so that's just my story.
Well, and even in some ways, it's like those negatives create a positive because it makes you say, like, why the hell not? Like, why not try this? You know what I mean? This has all happened. Let's go for it. And so you do real estate, but you also do where you're kind of flipping properties, right? And you're kind of renovating and doing that sort of thing too.
Yeah, so we are, so we're real estate investors. We actually buy distressed homes. We renovate them completely. One of our first houses, we knocked it down to the foundation actually and built a 2,400 square foot house. So again, is that normal to do when you're first getting your feet wet? No, it's not. But I wouldn't, I I would do it again the exact same way every time because we learned so much in that, those struggles that we really just had to figure it out and had to keep going. And so I feel like that's even like shortened our learning curve in so many ways because like sometimes people don't see those, those renovations or those things that come up in a new build essentially that we did on our first one. So we've kind of dove in, and lack of a better way to put it, in all areas of life. And yeah, we now renovate. We have 4 projects going on right now. we actually work with homeowners now as well. So they hire us. We do the design aspects and pick everything out. We bring in our crews, do all of the renovations. And yeah, so we've done everything from, and like the we've bought anything like in the 200 ranges to we're listing a house tomorrow for 1.3. And so, we've built up like what we like, what we know. We built up our teams. I think it's the biggest and hardest part about owning a business is really finding the people, like Justin had said before, finding the people that you trust, and that like that they have your back, you have their back. That's the biggest thing I feel like in life, but like really in business is finding that those team members to they see your vision, you see their vision, and you're on the same team. You're fighting for the same things, and so it's just a big it's a
You guys do beautiful work. I mean, I've seen, the pictures you post. It's really amazing. Very HGTV in the sense that, people go into a home and they're like, oh, ew, it's gross. I don't want it. And there's always someone like, no, there's a vision. We'll do it. And you guys do that. You make these beautiful homes and then sell them and people come in and it looks brand new, but you've renovated them. So you're doing amazing work. I absolutely love it. What is it like, for as a couple working together, because that's different than if like you both had different jobs, right? But you're working together, you live together, you are together. Do you guys have like, do you think it strengthens your relationship? Is there some times where you're like, I need space from you for a moment, or like we need to not talk about work? Like, how do you kind of deal with that?
I think it depends on the day.
Yes.
That's a great question. I think there's nobody else in this world that I would want to own a business with. So I'm very, very grateful for Justin being, the co-founder and being there with me through it all. I think we make a great team and we both have different strengths. And so I think, especially as we're building, I think it's really great to pull on each other's strengths and leave the rest to the other person who has those as a strength. Do we do that well? It depends on the day. I think that, like, I mean, honestly, in all honesty, like, I love it. I love it so much. Like, I'm so grateful to come home and celebrate like the wins with him, or like, we got a house under contract, or like, it just feels even more special because like it's your business, but then it's your partner too. So it's so cool to be able to celebrate that, but is it hard? It's extremely hard, because I was telling someone today, it's hard because it it almost puts like, a weird strain on your relationship, because not a strain, but like your relationship's in a different way, because it's like your relationship of like Devin and Justin, and then your relationship as Just Divine Properties. And so you kind of have to differentiate that and shut that off sometimes. And it's really hard when you're building a business because like everything is Just Divine Properties. And so he's really good at kind of putting it aside and like living life for like a few minutes, or whatever it is, whereas
Yeah.
like my mind kind of has an anxiety in that, like,
Everything's combined together. Yeah.
yeah. So I don't know, what do you think about relationship with
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's as great as it is shitty.
Yeah.
Like we create our own schedule, we do what we want to do, everything's on our shoulders, we're making our own money, but at the same time, like she said, it's very hard to separate the two sometimes. And when you live together, work together, and I'm an introvert. I need my space, and I don't. It's not because I don't like being around Devin. It's because I just need to be around me. And throughout this process, I've had to relearn who I am, and that's it. Just takes a lot of time by myself for me. And I don't know that Devin understood that at the beginning of it all, which is understandable, but. My time alone. I mean, you got to think about it. When we worked in corporate, I would work 12 to 14 hours a day away from Devin, and then come home and see each other at night and on the weekends. But when your work, when that 12 to 14 hours a day now is with that person, you don't realize that's a lot of extra time with that person. And then you live with them, and then you see friends with them, and so it's a lot. It's a lot, and you have to make sure you have your own time, and you have to set your own boundaries, and you have to have clear communication, which, we're talking about these things, but I'm pretty sure I'm horrendous at all of them. But it's the truth, and it's something that you got to work on every day, and you're gonna be bad at it. No, nobody's perfect, and there are plenty of things that you're gonna be bad at within your relationship, and so there's got to be a lot of grace and forgiveness and understanding that we're just human too, and we're gonna hurt each other. Just because we love each other doesn't mean we're not gonna hurt each other, and we're not gonna say things we don't mean, and we're not gonna be in bad moods, and all of that stuff I think is what people expect, and why people are so unhappy at times when that just doesn't happen all the time. And I think people are tired of hearing like relationships are work, because it is work, but it's different than work. It's a choice. Loving someone's a choice. It's not something my pastor said that falling in love is a choice. It's not, or being in love is a choice. It's not something you fall in and out of. So no matter what she does day to day, regardless of how good or bad it is, I have a choice to love her or not love her, and be with her or not be with her. So, but it's hard. It's different. It's hard. But as good as it is, and like I said, the highs are high, and the lows can be really low, because you have that relationship attached to the business.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. You choose who you want to love, but it's also, like you said, I feel like now more than ever, there's very high expectations where we expect our partner to be everything, to do everything with us, to like everything, to please us. And we've set sometimes these high expectations that nobody can meet. And so, like you said, it's like we're all human. We're all going to have bad days. It doesn't mean we don't care for one another. It's just sometimes I have a moment, or I need space, or, and like you said, communicating that, I say all the time, like, we never master communication. It is a constant thing that we're working on. And it sounds like, the two of you, especially in the last few years, have really just continued to work on that, to over communicate. And it seems to really, be improving the relationship as a whole, which is so wonderful to hear.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like a work of art. I feel like each day is a different day, and each day, we both go through different things. I mean, even like today, like, I was like on a whirlwind. I was like so upset over something, that like a light that didn't get installed today. Like, that's what, like, I was so annoyed at. I'm like texting him like in fury because he was at the property and I wasn't there, and I was so upset. And I'm like, literally, like, I'm like, I feel like I'm crying. Like, I'm just like, what's going on? And then I had to go to the property to drop off stuff today, and I met a friend there, and I picked up all these packages from UPS, and I thought I had everything, and then found out when I got there that the package with all of the items that I needed wasn't the one that they gave me. I have 3 others that have like nothing in it compared to what the other one does. And so I call him again in a fury, and for some reason my phone stopped working. My phone died. This is all right before like us like being on this. So
it's a sign to just take a breath, right?
and so I'm calling him from my friend's phone, and I'm trying to send him tracking, and I'm like, can you go back to the UPS store, which mind you is like what, 35, 40 minutes away. And so, I mean, the point of my story is like I drive him absolutely crazy, and vice versa some days, and like it's hard because it's like it's a business, like you're in a relationship with each other, and like I couldn't get back to UPS in time before they closed, and so I'm like, please, can you do this? And like obviously, like, I appreciate it, and he did it, and we still couldn't get the package. But then like he comes home, and I'm like, okay, now we got to go. Come on, we're getting like we have like 10 minutes, and so like it's it puts a strain. Like, I can't lie. Like, it's hard some days, like, by owning a business with your partner. But again, I go back to exactly what I said at the beginning. Like, I wouldn't want to own a business with anybody but him. And I'm so grateful for it. And we definitely have grown a lot.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, with the pandemic as well as we're recording this, in February 2021, it's an extra layer of just complexity and frustration and all these other things for everything else that everyone is going through. So that's always a whole nother layer. I like to kind of, we're coming to the end here, and this is one of my favorite things to do. And Devinne, I'll start with you, and Justin, ask you the same question. So Devinne, what is one thing that Justin has done for you recently that you really appreciated or really loved, or just made you feel really good?
For my birthday, Justin completely surprised me. I'm usually very, and I know, shocked, but very overbearing. And I'm usually like, I like to control things. Like I'm known for like planning my own parties, and he's like, just let it be. And so he really surprised me. I had no idea, but he hired like a chef from a restaurant, an executive chef from a restaurant around here. He planned a full dairy-free menu for me, came to my house, cooked, had all of like my favorite people in a room together. And it was just really, really special. And it was such a beautiful moment. And I felt like so much love and appreciation for that. And it really surprised me. And I feel like because I'm overbearing, it doesn't happen very often to be surprised. But that's big. And then I have one small one today when I'm like in a frenzy texting him about this light not being installed. Like he even said to me, like, it's okay, babe. Like, I know it sucks, but like, it's okay. And I like in that moment, like it calmed me. And like, I felt like instead of like my fingers moving faster, because I was just so annoyed, I just like, it's those, even like the birthday was so big and beautiful. It's just like those moments. He's really good with words, and when he really speaks from the heart, it touches me and it makes me feel like very appreciated and heard. And yeah.
I love that. Justin, what's something that Devinne has done for you recently that you really loved or appreciated or made you feel cared for?
Well, it's gonna be hard to follow that. She buys me ice cream and candy bars, and and leaves them around or surprises me with them, and that'll make me happy. And so when she's surprised, when she comes home and I've had a bad day and I got some ice cream in the freezer, then at least I know she's thinking about me.
I love that. I think, when I ask this question, it is the little stuff. It's a moment of I thought about you and I did something, whether it's I said something or gave you something or was there for you. That is such a huge part, in my opinion, of what makes a healthy relationship, just that sense of care and respect. And I think the two of you have that quite a bit. Justin, you have a podcast, and again, you guys have a business. If people want to check those out, where is the best place to do that?
Yeah, so Just Divine Properties is our real estate buying company, flipping company. You can find us justdivineproperties.com, Just Divine Properties on Instagram and Facebook. And then, I have a podcast. It's called The Alcoholic Entrepreneur. It is a lot about stuff about what we talked about today, real stuff with some real guests who've been through some real stuff and have been really successful on the other side, or just entrepreneurs, that are influential and just have a really good mindset, because I think that's where it all starts, is what's going on between your ears. So
Yes.
The Alcoholic Entrepreneur, The Alcoholic Entrepreneur on Instagram and Facebook, alcoholicentrepreneur.com, and that's where you can find it.
Wonderful.
Podcast available on all platforms, that whatever one's your favorite.
And the last question I want to ask the two of you is, do you have any words of advice that you would give to either someone who's single or in a relationship of how to have a healthy relationship that works for the two of you?
I think my biggest piece of advice, honestly, is be yourself. Don't try to morph into something that you're not, because eventually it's gonna, bite you in the butt. That's not who you are. You're gonna find somebody that loves you for who you are. And even when you're in a relationship, like, be real. Like, obviously from like even this last hour, like, we're as real and as you come, and don't sugarcoat it a lot. And sometimes like those conversations are really, really hard, or something. Anything is really hard. But be real, because that's exactly that's who you are, and you don't want to lose sight of who you are.
And I would agree with that. And I would follow that up with go to therapy.
Yes.
Go to therapy right now. I mean, whether you think you have a problem or not, if you don't think you have a problem, you probably really need therapy if you don't think you have any issues. But I think that part of being who you really are is learning who you really are. And so I think you need to go to therapy, and everybody needs to talk to somebody about what's going on in their head. And then when you get a boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, like, and it starts to get serious, I think you need to add a therapist in there too, or invite them to sessions with you, because it's necessary. There's just too much going on in the world to not have a third party that you can dump your shit on. It's important, and there's a stigma
Yes.
around therapists and going to therapy that is unnecessary. You know, I support anybody who's going to better their mental health.
Yeah, we talk about therapy on the show all the time. I've been to therapy myself. I'm a huge advocate for it. And there's so many types of therapy and types of therapists. So it's a really vast array of what you can choose from. So I thank you both again for your vulnerability and your honesty and your realness, as you say, in sharing your story, and excited for your business and your continued growth as people and as a couple. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.